Hey SIG folks, welcome back to part 2 where we are going to reassemble the P210 American frame that we disassembled in the last video before the battery got low. If you like this content, like and subscribe. If you find it helpful, leave a comment and let's get cracking on it. So first we're going to put together our little trigger and trigger bar assembly. I did that in the last video, but for the sake of thoroughness on this one, we're going to do it again real quick. The way I try to do it, which seems to be fairly easy to do, is that when this is disassembled, I leave this little pivot pin here for the trigger bar in part way. If it comes out, just get it started again. And I like to have it to where the end of the pin, can you see that? The end of the pin is just sitting in here a little bit, because the trigger bar, when it fits back on and they go back together in this orientation, and see that the hole here on this little lug is up, the hole in the trigger is up, and they go back together kind of like so. But I try to leave that little bit of extra pin sticking in so I can kind of catch on that hole in the trigger bar, and then usually what you can do is just kind of start pressing this in by hand a little bit and it'll start going. And then I can just take my wooden dowel here and give it some gentle tapping to seat it back. Now, because that's wood, it doesn't get it quite all the way, and so I can just take my little punch here, try to work in that shadow, and just give it a little tap to even it up some. So there we go. Nice and even on both sides. Beautiful. You want to make sure that you don't forget this little spring here. This is the fella that retains your pivot pin for the trigger within the frame. And the way he's going to go is that there's a groove on the top of the trigger right there. Kind of goes crossways, and the little leg on here is going to sit in the left side. So the side that's facing me right now, it's going to sit in there, and it's going to go kind of back down beneath this hole to where the bended portion of this spring is kind of sitting in that hole there, because that's what's going to retain your pin. I'm going to do it with some tweezers just so that you guys maybe can see a little bit better. It's going to be hard for me to give you too good of a view on this, but we'll do what we can. So I just take it by that little leg. I'm coming in from the left side here. I'm just going to stick it down in like so. You can see it sitting high still. I'm just going to take it and kind of press it down in, and we're really way too far in that hole. It's too much. So all I'm going to do then is just take this small punch and kind of get above it and try to press it down in, because you should see it in the hole. I think you can. I'll get something behind it. You should see it in that hole, but just barely clipping in through the edge. It's not going to take up like the center of the hole or anything. Okay, now that we've got that done, this is kind of the tricky part of this whole deal. This is the hard part. And I wish I had an easy way for you to do it, but I don't. You just kind of have to you got to do what you got to do here. I think the only trick I really have for you is you take the trigger spring, this coiled spring here, it goes back down into the bottom of the trigger, just down in there like that. But now if you try to swing this up, the little trigger bar there, it hits the spring on the side, it doesn't actually compress it. If you take a 5/32 roll pin punch, you can push down on that spring, apply tension to the trigger bar, and then it's able to get over top of it like that and hold it. Now you have to hold this together. As soon as you let it go, that's coming back out. So there's no way I can tell you to do this. It's simple. I kind of just grab it with like a finger, like a middle finger and thumb here, and apply pressure to the top. You have to have some hand dexterity for this. And I need to come in with that trigger bar through the back of the frame here. I'm going to try to catch it with my finger as I'm coming down in to the trigger guard to apply pressure to the bottom of the trigger. It's coming in, and now I've got the thing kind of arrested in here, pushing it in, but you still have to maintain control of it. And so now what I've got is I've worked it around to where I have my middle or my index finger of my left hand inside the frame, pushing on the back of the top of the trigger. I have my thumb here pressing against the bottom of the actual trigger pulling surface. I can look through there and try to get that lined up. I don't know if I can do it on camera for you there, but get that, yeah, you can see it. Get that lined up, and then start in with the pin. And you just kind of have to wiggle this around. Kind of wiggle it around. Until it finds its home in there. And it is a lot easier said than done. Okay. And you might lose that that trigger spring at some point. Just, if you do, start again. And if I was not doing this with the camera, it would be a little bit easier. So it looks harder than it actually is here, but it does take, it just takes some patience and some wiggling and trying to find that proper spot. We're starting to get in there now. There it is. See, it doesn't take a ton of force. You just have to be lined up right. But you just have to kind of wiggle the top and bottom of the trigger from back here, from down here, while trying to not let that angle become too obtuse to allow that spring, the trigger spring, to pop out. But now that we've got it started, we are in a great position here. So once you get it started about a third of the way in, now everything's retained and you have a lot more flexibility. So what we're going to do now is just take this wooden dowel and I'm just going to give it some taps. Let's look to the other side. I think what I'm going to do here is it looks like my little retainer pin is maybe bumped up a little bit more than I would want it to. I'm just going to take my punch and push it down a little to make sure that it's not going to interfere with that trigger pin there. I think it may have been catching on that slightly. It's causing our problem. Yep, now it goes in much more easily. So you don't want to be using a lot of force. You don't want to pound on this kind of stuff, because if everything's lined up, it goes pretty easy. And you can see that we have that back together. No marring, no deformation. The trigger is pulling and resetting perfectly. Beautiful. Well, now we're on the home stretch. So, all right, putting back in the magazine catch. You have a spring in the end of it here, just like that. You have this detent with a spring under it, just like that. You have this little foot, and it's going to go towards the inside of the frame, facing the front. So that it is catching on the interior of the hole here. The way I like to do this is I'm just going to get it lined up best I can, down in to the frame like that. Make sure my little detent foot thing is about right. I'm going to press in a little bit on the back side here. Make sure that it's not falling into the magazine well as best I can. I'll put this index card there again. Take this 1.5 millimeter screwdriver, push in, push down, and it pops down into place. Very good. Perfect. And interestingly, it actually has a cutout in it there so that you can do adjustment on your over travel without removing that. So that's kind of nice of them. Good of them to do that for you. Okay, carrying on. Go ahead, get our safety back in. We're going to stick it in the fire position here, just like so. You have to push down a little bit on the back to get it to rest in where it needs to. Put it up into the safe position, like so. Take this little short screw. It is going to be, once again, a T15 Torx. Backspin. Hear it click. And just go in gently, seat it up. You don't need a ton of torque. I'm just going to kind of get it finger tight, because once the grips are on, that can't really back out anyway. So no need to get crazy with it. Don't strip out your frame or anything. Take the little hammer sear box. Make sure that our little barrel nut here hasn't spun. I'm going to drop it in like so. Put it back in the fire position. I don't think you actually have to, but oh well, I did it anyway. You have your longer T15 screw here, and it just goes in underneath the beaver tail. I'll drop them on right there. T15 Torx. Put it in, backspin till I hear it click, and just gently start returning it. And I'm just gonna snug it up some. It's one of those things where if it started coming loose on you, you would feel it. So I'm not gonna go really crazy on tightening that down. Safety is working. Trigger pulls. Trigger resets. Everything's running great. Okay, let's go ahead and put the slide stop spring back in. This is pretty easy. All you really have to do is come in like so and get that little foot back in to that blind hole there. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, a little hole right there underneath my finger. You come in with the little short leg of this spring. Trying to work in a shadow again. But get that in like that, and then it just lays forward into this channel here. And it will be gone through by the by your slide stop, your takedown pin, basically. Oh, grip back on, lead from the front, and they'll just fall right into place on the back. Very much like a P38 grip. Come in from the left side with your little grip screw, backspin, and then just take it in gently. Nothing on this pistol really requires any force. It's all fairly easy to do. And we're just going to snug that up a little bit. Nothing too crazy. You don't want to compress the wood and cause damage to your grips. So there it is, folks. We're back together on that. Check back for more videos on the P210 and other cool guns. If you enjoy this content, like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Thanks for watching.